Hi, I'm Akilora.
And I'm Rohan Nahar.
Welcome to The Long Take. This week we're discussing House of the Dragon, which ended its first season earlier this week. It's the first Game of Thrones prequel. We're expecting more, but for now, this was coming under the cloud of Game of Thrones basically sabotaging its final seasons. We've been through 10 weeks of it now, so the perceptions have really changed and evolved over that because it began in late October. How do you feel about it right now?
My feelings remain kind of consistent through the season. I feel I
Okay.
enjoyed it when it started, and then I was really engaged the whole way through. I kept looking forward to the next episode, even if I wasn't following the intricacies of the plot. It was, broadly speaking, I was invested.
Yeah, the intricacies of the plot are affected by the fact that every time you sort of pick up with a new episode, it almost feels like you've lived a week, but the show has lived months or years at times.
Yeah, and without any explanation, right? No one's gonna throw some text at the screen and
the only thing they'll do is I think that every time that happens, a time jump, in the first few minutes they'll try to get a dialogue in which reveals said time jump. So at least to give you an idea of how much time has passed.
Plus I was already expecting some form of time jump and cast changes. So it would have been weirder if I didn't know that, I suppose. But then because I did, I was kind of, when it happened, I was like, oh, okay, so this is when it happens.
Yeah, so I think going in, what I knew was that it was going to be a 10-year gap at some point because I think I'd done interviews with some of the cast members. What I didn't know was that there was going to be time jumps within the same cast as well. Even when we have the younger people, I don't know if it happens with the older ones, but when we have the younger crowd, we do mini jumps with them as well. I think the second episode is a year after the first one or something. The third episode I think is 6 months or something, and we again jump 2-3 years in the middle. So by the time we even do that 10-year jump, when the cast actually changes, we've actually already spent 8 or 9 years with the younger cast, in terms of their lives. So it's actually, I think the entire season ends up being probably 20 years, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, plus those shorter time jumps in the first third of the season kind of establishes what kind of show it is, right? So when the longer ones happen, you're like, oh yeah, I expect it. So it's not jarring.
Yeah, it's almost like doing 2 Crown seasons in one, because Crown is known to do those short jumps, right, the entire time whenever they do, because they always do minimum 1 decade, if not 2. So they have to jump 2-3 years if they're gonna do 8 or 9, 10 episodes. But I think they have 8 episodes actually. So this one does that, but then midway through the season, literally, it almost becomes oh yeah, we don't have time to or we don't want to spend too much with this cast now, so we're just gonna blow up the entire show and introduce a whole new cast.
Weirdly enough, more than Game of Thrones, it reminded me of The Crown, especially that first episode, which a coronation happens and another one happens later on.
Yeah.
And the whole arc itself is very much, a queen coming into her own, combined with obviously the coming of age of her as a teenager and then, becoming a mother.
Yeah, even the finale, I also sort of get feelings of a mirror, sort of almost I felt it was intentional how in the first episode ends with her mother dying because a child is pushed out of her, but the child also is stillborn. And in the end, she gives birth. She's almost so, I don't know, I don't know what, I couldn't really tell what she was feeling or going through, but it's almost she wanted to be rid of the pregnancy or something. She just wanted to get done with it. And the child is not born as well in this case. So that way, the parallels were clearly intentional.
Yeah, in that way, the show, the entire season feels like a contained story with a very, it's written very carefully. There is a very defined structure. There are those themes that it keeps revisiting. There are the pregnancies and the childbirths.
Oh yeah, that's not the only one, right? There's Damon's second wife as well. It happens with.
Just the fact that it keeps returning to graphic childbirth sequences in itself is a motif. So it's doing a lot of things. And yeah, you're right. She, by the time, and I think some character, some midwife person also comments about it. She's like, how many times have we been through this before? Like, so it's acknowledging like the repeated torture as well.
Yeah.
In the final episode.
Yeah, and the midwife things are done previously as well. Like I remember, now you just mentioned the midwife. Like I remember I think it was the second episode or the third, where they go into the forest, entire party, and Queen Alicent like is pregnant at that point, the young Queen Alicent, and she like has already been through, like she's already produced one heir, Aegon, and she has pregnant with the second one, and she makes some comment about to the king, like how her pregnancies have been like quite like normal, like she hasn't really been through a lot, and they give us like a reaction shot of the midwife, and she's like, I don't know what she's talking about, but like that's a blatant lie.
I mean, what did you feel about those sequences? Like, I remember watching the first one and being like, oh my god, that's kind of insane. And then by the time the final one happens, I was like shocked.
The first one seems almost like childish then.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I don't know what they were thinking though.
I don't know. I think I sort of like in a way welcome them almost. Like I don't know if it sounds weird, but when the first one happened, like my reaction actually was more like I hated Viserys in that moment.
Yeah, because I think you're meant to.
To me, it seemed like, I felt like you were like, oh, everyone thinks of you as this like gentle king, but you essentially sanctioned your wife's like death by like being like so like son like whatever like wanting. That's always like the holy grail for him or something. Like I must have it. And I was like, this guy's like irredeemable at this point for me. Like I don't care how nice he has been to this woman for like however long they've been married, but this is like a breaking point for me, and I cannot be like this guy cannot come back from this. But then he does somehow over the course of the season. Like the things that he like sort of the way he behaves, like he's sometimes the sanest guy in the room. Like a lot of times he's the only sane person, and everyone else is going bonkers around him. And without him, eventually what will happen in season 2, the war would have started much sooner. So in a way, like you have to sort of, he might not be like a great like man per se, like a great sort of father, whatever. Like he's so like interested in having a male heir, but then he's also like, I guess was good for the kingdom. Like otherwise, the chaos would have started much sooner.
So he is pretty normal for the whatever fantasy period that he exists in. Also, I feel I can imagine a dude behaving like that even in our own country, circa 2022.
Yeah.
Just being like, I have 4 daughters or 6 daughters or whatever. I need a male whatever heir. And like if the wife is having a difficult labor, then I'm 100% sure they would like choose whatever 50-50 chance.
Yeah. I felt those parallels sometimes as well, which is like almost eerie because like like you're watching a show which is like supposed to be ancient, whatever history, at least if it's in a set like in a world where the future will be Earth or whatever, or like at least our times will be modified, and I'm just like, this doesn't feel like sometimes fantasy or like like parallel like ages ago or whatever. Like this feels like I'm still just living in this world, except there's no like dragons or whatever.
I mean, that being said,
and so we just have better medicine.
I was kind of bothered by the repeated childbirth stuff, not because of what they were showing, but because of how kind of pointlessly mean-spirited it felt. Like, I know that they didn't do a lot of the problematic stuff that they used to do in Game of Thrones this season, right? Which was like the violence against women, right? But this felt in a way like a stand-in for that. Like, हमें अत्याचार तो करना ही है, but like we won't do it that way, we'll do it this way. And I'm thinking, why though? Like, why do you have to like be so brutal? Because it's happening, like there's no equivalent of that to the men, right? They just get their head chopped off, which is like whatever.
Yeah, which happens on screen.
But here it's like sustained torture, sustained like cruelty, and it happens once and twice. But then after like the 6th time, I'm like, oh, so this is, you're making some sort of point now, but I don't get it. Are you trying to say that it's difficult for them? Like, but I got that just because of the patriarchal setup of the society. Like, I got that already. So what's next now?
Right. Yeah, no, that's fair.
So what you said about Viserys kind of transforming as the season goes along, similar thing happens with Daemon also, right? Because Daemon is like when he's introduced, he's like the villain, right? Like there was no doubt in my head,
he's like
oh
a
my god,
playboy villain.
like he's proper villain. So when he arrives, you're like, oh my god, like something is going to happen now, right? Something not nice. But then final episode, he's like a sympathetic figure almost, right? Which is kind of remarkable if you think about the arc of that character.
Which like in a way they flip it with like Kristen Cole, right? Like when he's introduced,
Correct.
he seems like he's gonna be like the voice of reason or something, or at least like the person who actually sort of like cares about this woman. If like no one else, like everyone else like treats Rhaenyra as like second class or whatever, she's just the cupbearer. It's gonna be good to have like someone for her to like who's gonna actually like listen to her, at least like be there, or maybe he's actually gonna like care about her. But the moment like she sort of gives in and becomes vulnerable around him, his like reaction is like so bonkers. It's like, oh, you're a princess, but why don't you just like give up your entire like fiefdom and just like run away with me? And then when that doesn't happen, like when she rejects him naturally, she's not gonna like abandon her entire family for like this dude. She's like fell in like partially in love or just like had like sex for a couple of times. He's just like he becomes the next villain, right? Like replacing almost like the Damon's like masculine energy in the show.
I mean, I kind of found it a little one note, like the Kristen Cole thing, because
I think that feels one note because it's around the time when the time jump happens, right? The big one. Yeah, I think that's why it doesn't land as well. It would have landed if it like we had seen those 10 years.
Probably, yeah, because when he's basically like a spurned lover, right? And I don't know what he was thinking. He's essentially like a rebound, right? So when Rhaenyra is like, no, thank you, his villain turn happens basically off screen.
And it partially happens. Like the kickoff happens at the wedding where he like literally beats up the husband's lover in front of everyone, and it's just magical that he somehow survives that. But I guess it's explained by the fact that he sort of is taken under the wing of the queen, right? So if the queen favors him, no one's gonna say like, why is that dude who murdered someone still around?
Which is what I found really interesting about this show in particular, is that Game of Thrones had very clearly defined heroes and villains, right? Even though it pretended to be all like nuanced,
grey characters.
Yeah, that's all nonsense. Like you knew who you wanted to root for and you knew who you wanted to hate, right?
Yeah, like there were those sort of characters. Yeah, there were very few characters who would flip between black and white.
I mean, even though ostensibly like Jaime Lannister was a grey character, right? But he was a hero, right?
Yeah.
I mean, after
eventually,
he was a hero.
Once you understood him, like that's what he looked like.
And then they were like the more obvious, like Jon Snow is like Captain America. Almost. Like
he was literally from the beginning. He was a sympathetic character, right? There was no way you could ever hate him.
But here, I am still like, I've seen one whole season of this show and I have no idea who's the hero, who's the like. कल को कोई भी इनमें से villain बन सकता है and I would buy it, and anyone could become the hero and I'd buy it, and that's down
also
to like
takes very little for them to become that, because they have at least some of them, the lead characters have such like, they basically have like nuclear weapons with them, right? So like they can be like good their entire lives, or like they can have good intentions their entire lives, I should say that. But then they do like one thing in the sky and you'll be like, yeah, that character is like bonkers.
No, but then that if that were to happen, like for instance, if a Daenerys situation were to happen in this show, I would buy it, right? Because I've spent 10 episodes not having made up my mind about them.
No, I'm saying I wouldn't. It's not like I wouldn't buy it. I'm saying that would change your perception, right? Like if they went crazy, they would be like, even if like say Rhaenyra did that, right? If Rhaenyra just like after the reaction to her like losing her child, she just goes like probably like kills 3 of the other family. You'll be like, yeah, like now I'm not so sure like if her entire intentions about holding the realm together were like that honorable.
But then wouldn't you feel like it was justified? Because I feel
exactly. And that's what good writing does, right?
Exactly,
and that's what they've done across the season, is that they've except the part where like I'm not convinced. The only part I'm not convinced is Alicent's like undying belief in her husband's last words, which went completely against what he had been saying when he was sober for 20 years. Except those parts, everything else has felt like these are just human beings dealing with the limited information they have, or dealing with like the ambitions or the goals that they have, or like caring about the people who are around them and acting on those values, right? It doesn't feel like they're chess pieces on a board or something.
Yeah. Even though the plot is very much like, what's the next move? And like उसने उसका ये कर दिया. It's very like, I found it to be very trashy. Like this is trashy. It's like a teen show almost. You know?
I think it also feels that way because it moves so quickly, right?
But then I feel with Alicent particularly, like the show is so, it's trying so hard to not make her the villain, but also is putting her in that position, which I find very interesting because we are projecting our and whatever biases that we have onto
and we're
her.
projecting whatever our understanding of like medieval like kingdoms is, right? Like, we're like, yeah, this is how things are supposed to be because this is how that person has said it and that person said it and we've heard it in like 5 different like movies or something.
She hasn't done anything wrong per se, right? She is in fact almost naive in the position that she's been put in. She isn't, for instance, she wasn't bred to be a queen like Rhaenyra, like who's waiting all her life for this job. She has always
and she doesn't want it, right? As it is revealed in the second last episode when Rhaenys confronts her, like, have you ever thought about yourself? And it's almost like a mix of like not just thinking about her family's survival, which she has put first, but also a case of like she's never really thought about it.
Yeah, she is the ultimate housewife, right? Everything she's doing is ultimately for her kids, right? Which
how to keep them alive.
Yeah. I suppose that's, and in a way when whatever Viserys mumbles, whatever he does, like the prophecy and stuff, I don't know if she, like, it's a part of her is believing it because she wants to believe it. Like, it's not, even she knows it's not like
it's almost like she needed like some reason.
Nudge. Yeah, she needed a nudge.
To like, to be like, you know, how do I ensure my kids come out on top, right? It's almost like a rat race or whatever. Like, because she knows, like, she's been told her entire life, ever since she started having kids, her father's been telling her there is not room for 2 families. If the day Rhaenyra becomes queen, your kids are always going to be like under the sword or whatever.
Yeah.
So she's been like, you know, that's been drilled into her. And we saw, right? We saw how anxious she was as a teenager. Like how she would just pull out her nails and everything. Like, so even though that may not happen physically, there is the young Alicent is still somewhere. Daenerys, like the brother who's like Daenerys was trying to marry her off to, like, I forgot the name of Jason Momoa's character.
Khal Drogo.
Yeah. So there's a time I think where he sort of implies that he's ready to like marry him or himself or something, and then he's
it was her introduction scene was off.
Yeah, like it's almost like he was in like love with her and he was happy to have his wife or whatever.
And stuff. And
I think he only like sort of marries her off because he wanted like Khal Drogo's like army to conquer Westeros back, right? Otherwise, and so like, and it's been told to us even through the seasons, like the Targaryens used to be like that. So like, I came into the show with that sort of accepted knowledge in my head, right? Like that this is how Targaryen dynasty has always been because they believe it's almost like, and as we know, right, George Martin has always taken everything from like our history. So kings and queens of Europe used to do this because they used to believe otherwise their bloodlines would like thin out or whatever, their royal bloodlines. So they had to preserve their royal bloodlines, they had to like intermarry and ensure that their children would be like. So this is why a king of Greece or a queen of that, like, or a duchy or princess of like some Romania would marry some like other kingdom and stuff like that, which is basically what like they're doing, right? They're ensuring.
Isn't like the queen and like whatever Prince Philip also like some cousin person,
exactly,
like second
like
cousin.
and they have it, which is why they also have like, now that we know how medicine works, like it's like frowned upon because we know it's like gonna like result in deformities, and that happened that in the if they were too related, if you're just like have children and your blood keeps thinning, eventually your children are not gonna be born properly, which is what sort of, that's the other side to see all those childbirth scenes, right? Like that's almost in a way it's happening, like they don't understand it, but it's happening because I think even Viserys, like they don't explain it ever because she dies so quickly, but Viserys' first wife was, I think, apparently his second cousin or something. Like her granddad was like a Targaryen or something at some point.
And like obviously I think Joffrey was he was Jaime and Cersei's.
Yeah, that was the way we saw. Right. But yeah, like in this situation, it's just like this is right now accepted, right? Like at a point, eventually, it became unacceptable. I guess whatever because of the religion or whatever. I think the seven become much more powerful, right, as the years go on. But currently, this is how just way things go. So I think for me, it was never like a. I remember like I saw like when the show started in August, there were like reviews literally which like they took this objection to this. They were like, how can a show display incest so openly? And I'm just like, dude, it's a show about Targaryens. What were you expecting?
I think the difference with this show as compared to Game of Thrones is that Game of Thrones में जब भी होता था, you kind of noticed it. You know, there was no point where you were like, oh yeah, this is what happens. Right? Whenever it did happen, you were like, ew.
Yeah.
But here, it feels very matter of fact. Like when the first time it happens, you kind of noticed it. But then as the show goes along, it's either like you get used to it or whatever.
Yeah.
But then
and it's supposed to be matter of fact, right? Because like they've been doing practicing it like it's common knowledge. Like everyone's marrying their like sisters and everything, which literally like Aegon is married his like younger sister. It's never shown on screen. Like she's just like shown I think once with her two kids, but that's happened there.
I think there was one point where someone like offhandedly mentions कि कोई some बच्ची को शादी करवा दो with some other her own brother or something like some baby.
Yeah, and that was suggested. And the cousin, like the step siblings are married right here with like the children between the not dead Velaryon. They changed that. He ran off in a boat. I don't know if he'd become important later. The gay guy, but that guy's son Velaryon. They're actually not his sons, but like strong sons in a way. Strong and Irina's sons have been sort of married off to their first cousins or whatever. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, but something like that. Yeah, it's all over the place. Like this is what Targaryens are. You just have to like this is their life, and it's nothing out of the ordinary for them.
I suppose, yeah.
Until they like, unless you teach them like medicine from the future, and then they'll be like, oh God, what have we been doing? Because right now they believe that if they don't do this, they'll lose like whatever control over the dragon or something, right? Like this is what's giving them their power, which is dumb, but like they don't have knowledge of science.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense for whatever internal logic is of the show. Dragon stuff, like dragon stuff was cool, I suppose. There's a lot of it.
Yeah, which like made sense because like it's a trusted property now, right? Like Game of Thrones, I think, had like a budget of 8 million, I think, for the entire season. First one, if I'm not wrong. They had to like save up their budget for that. What was the first battle? Blackwater, right? In first season, episode 9.
I don't remember.
Where like Tyrion sort of masterminds it and saves King's Landing from Stannis Baratheon.
First season. That was first season.
That's season 2. That's possible.
I think Ned dies in the first season, right?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm talking about season 2, episode 9. My bad. Yeah, first season, episode 9 is, you're right, obviously. That's the big one. They didn't have a battle in the entire season then? Oh yeah, they did a battle off screen.
Yeah, so I remember like some people had put some tweets out comparing like Game of Thrones ka first season and House of the Dragon ka first season in terms of just visual, like just the joust sequence in House of the Dragon, just like a full stadium and stuff, whereas Game of Thrones was like a patch of land.
Yeah, naturally. So yeah, exactly. Like even though like, you know, like fantasy wasn't like a thing on like TV, right? Like Lord of the Rings happened sure on movies in 2000s, early 2000s, but like TV pay wasn't like a proven thing, so no one was gonna spend like hundreds of millions of dollars.
No, but I remember watching Game of Thrones the day it premiered, and I remember feeling, oh my God, this is a big show.
Yeah.
Like at no point.
At that point, I think that was like what was like big for TV, right? And we've just been spoiled in that decade since. Like Thrones came to 2010 or 11, and between 2010 and 2020, like we just like. TV has like it's probably like still going on, right? The golden age of TV or whatever. And people just been spending more and more. Like we've only spoken about like the biggest or the most expensive TV show of all time. And these guys are still not spending anything close to that, but they obviously are spending. I think they're close to spending like I think Game of Thrones season 5 or Game of Thrones season 6 level money already. So and that shows on screen from the beginning.
It shows on screen. I mean. Now that you mentioned Lord of the Rings, like I dropped out of that show. I disliked it.
I think I only finished it because like I was gonna like write something for work. But yeah, I probably would have dropped out if I was watching for myself.
Yeah, I watched like those whatever. कितने screen होते थे?
Though, yeah.
3.
Though.
I don't remember. So too, I barely got through those, and then I was like, no way in hell am I going to put myself through this for 8 weeks.
Yeah. It gets like marginally better, but like I'm not. It's just like if I was gonna have to compare it to this one, I mean, it's a bit two very different shows. I don't want to put them against like side by side, but like House of Dragon is like 50 times better. Like relate to. I can relate to them because they just behave like human beings in other times.
Like the oldest themes ever created. There's jealousy, betrayal.
Yeah, it's just like basic emotions, right? And it works. And like LOT has none of this, and that's why it fails. Like they just feel, all of them feel like gods or whatever, and it's like, why am I watching this?
They talk so much,
and they're talking like fancy, which I guess Tolkien or whatever. So they're talking like fancy language, like, and they make like high, like they'll speak in metaphors and stuff. These guys will speak like us. They'll be like, "Tune mere sath ye kaise kara? How dare you? Blah blah blah. I'll kill you."
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of impressed with just the sheer level of stuff that happens in this show, House of the Dragon, and how difficult it must have been to not only explain to viewers like all the different moving pieces, but also to not come across like you're explaining. Like we complained about exposition, but at no point does this feel like you're being spoken to condescendingly, or it takes you along for the ride, and I think that is where it succeeds also, because you want to know what happens next,
and the best part is like that what you need for a show to work is that it needs to be like watchable moment to moment, right? And this show kills at that. Like the first episode, like it's been I think it's been like 4 months since I saw it. I think I saw it in like late July or something, and I couldn't wait to talk about that episode to everyone. I was like, this is like one of the best pilots I've seen in like years.
Yeah, it was really good pilot.
And then, I mean, the show probably didn't like hit those heights in the episodes after that, but like there are still some episodes. I think it's the Driftmark one I love. And that's what I love about the show, right? It's like you can feel like there are individual moments and individual scenes where I'm just like, that was amazing. Like you were hooked moment to moment. You're like, oh, 1 ghanta khatam ho gaya. I don't know where that went. Versus,
it was
there's too much of like LOTR and like other shows like that. Like there's too much of like they're designing the show like a long movie, right? They're like, aaj story chalu hoga, is story khatam hoga episode 7 mein. And like, no, stop doing that.
This is television, yeah.
Yeah, this is television. Like everything is paid off in the same episode. You start here, you end there, and like everything is built on that. And you're writing for TV. You're not writing for like 50 hours.
I also enjoyed like just small like subversive moments where you just having seen like 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, you expect something to happen in episode 9, but then they're like, it's
that was such a different episode 9. I was like, episode 9 is gonna be like the big battle, right? Like, and then episode 10 will be like the tables whatever cleaner and you set up for next season. But episode 9 was like so contained. Like episode 9 was like more contained than any other episode probably. It's literally about like finding one dude. Like it's about like finding हमारा वो कहाँ गया बंदा, उसको ढूंढना है. You just like run around like King's Landing and they have a conversation, like, which is what show I loved about Game of Thrones, and I wish the show would do that more because it's so contained. It's like too much King's Landing sometimes for me. I was like, I wish they could give it more space and expand. Because I love those moments where the character would just go on like journeys. The entire season, Brienne and Arya would just walk. They're going somewhere, and you would just like see what their journey is, and they would talk to each other and figure things out. Like and that's what like episode 9 did a bit, right? Like, even in a contained space, they paired Kristen Cole with Aemond, and they paired those like twins or whatever.
Even the final episode is a contained story. Right?
It's like only Dragonstone.
Yeah, it opens with him like kind of absent-mindedly just walking around.
Yeah.
And over the course of that hour, the dread builds, right? When it comes to that child in particular, because we keep coming back to me, like when they suggest that we should go as envoys.
I was like, that's a bad call. The moment I heard that mission, I was like, are you crazy? Like, what is wrong with this? This person wants to be queen, and her first move is, let's send my teenage children who have never been in a fight solo without any protection. Okay, off you go.
And then she says something like, you will be welcomed or something. No, they will not be welcomed.
Like, what is wrong? And it becomes like full horror movie. Like, I loved that shot, when he like lands at Storm's End.
And Vagar is in the background.
Yeah, like Storm's End. पहले तो नाम से ही तुमने you've built it. I mean, yeah, there has to be something dramatic. And he lands there. It's like that Vagar shot was insane. I was like, yeah, this guy's not coming back. I knew it the minute he landed and that shot happened. I was like, this guy is not making it alive today.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so nicely done, right? Because it is contained and you're invested in that character. And you don't really know much about him, but then you're like, oh, he shouldn't die.
Yeah.
But then you know he's like a dead man walking the whole time. And you know what's going to happen once he dies. You know? And so yeah. I mean, 2 years now, I suppose they've said, right?
The wait, probably like early 2024, sadly. But I mean,
by which time I will forget every last thing about this.
That's why recaps exist.
But I guess something to it could have gone so like horrifically wrong.
Yeah, because like even if they made it mediocre, what would happen is they would be like, yeah, like Game of Thrones is back, and it's like, it's like kachara. Like let's forget about Game of Thrones because like people just piled on, right? Like the aftermath of like watching season 8, because of that, it would have gotten a bad rap. Even more of that, even though they were not connected. But like, so where you were sort of like you were going uphill. You had to like fight everyone's.
And you hold like the franchise's future depends on this show, right?
Yeah, because the finale butchered it of the main show. It fell to this one to sort of like clean the slate and ensure that now it's almost
not only is it good, it's good on its own terms.
Yeah.
Like it's not
it's
trying
just
to
a good
copy.
Show.
Yeah. It's like a really good fantasy show that kind of stands on its own 2 feet without like doing. I mean, I guess there is like a couple of fan service moments, like Dagger stuff and like Aegon stuff, but then largely it's independent, and that's what's cool about. Like tonally, it's so different from Game of Thrones, just like the way it's made, and I felt all of that was really nice. So I was like very impressed with this show.
Yep, that does it. Thank you so much. That's all for this episode of The Long Take. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at @thelongtakepod. You can write to us at thelongtakepod@gmail.com. Please leave us a rating and a review. This episode, and we will see you next week.